Brent Howland,
And Mike Marachka.
and this is episode 1 of the SkilledCast podcast.
Yeah.
Uh, episode 1. So we're still trying to figure things out, but we have a bunch of interesting things we do want to talk about today. We want to talk about new things happening here at Skilled. We have a couple of interesting articles that have been happening this week in tech that we want to discuss and give our opinion, and we'd obviously love to hear your opinion as well. So the first thing I did want to talk about is we do have a new YouTube channel, and our YouTube channel so far is me and Mike uploading some of our new interesting topics, like what are the best practices for your resume.
Yeah.
How do you think those videos turned out, Mike?
I like them. We're looking a little awkward in front of the camera at first, but we're kind of building up a platform. That's totally fine. I think at the end of the day, it really matters what the content's like more than anything else.
Yeah, I think it was like, yeah, we did a couple weeks of video recording. We're like, let's take a break and just do our audio. We assume audio is a little bit easier, but we'll see
We,
how it pans out after this episode. But yeah, so we did a couple of videos on best practices for your resume, about just talking, just random tips we think would be good based on our experience, and also we had a bonus video of just talking specifically about if you had employment gaps in your resume. And you know the spoiler, we do think it's okay if you have employment gaps. It's just trying to figure out, how to explain that concisely. I think it is
should
the main.
definitely check it out because we have a lot of info on it. So definitely worth checking out. So
Yeah. So we don't even have a YouTube user URL now, but I'll definitely include the information in the description of this podcast. Yeah, that's about it for now. So cool.
fantastic. Well, one of the first things we kind of wanted to talk about was this question we get asked a lot, and it's this idea of like, can you get a job in tech if you don't have a college degree? And I think it's a fair question, and it's something that like a lot of people want to know. Like, can I be a programmer if I don't, know advanced, calculus or something like that? Or can I, work in computers and software if I, haven't gone and gotten a master's degree in AI or something like that? So it's an interesting question. Brent, I'm curious as to what your take is on this.
Yeah, so first let's clarify. So when we say college degree, do we also mean, you mean something not a boot camp? Like a boot camp doesn't count as a college degree. You mean like a 4-year
Yeah, four
college
years
degree, like a proper CS degree
for
for
sure.
tech interview.
Yes,
Got it. Yeah, I think that I do think that that's the thing. Again, I probably just hinted at it. It's where I think now it's becoming more acceptable to get a job in tech without a college degree because of the fact that there are those type of boot camps where you get real life experience. And I assume that there are a lot of tech companies out there that you know probably prefer, like, if you get a degree, a CS degree, or like an economics degree or something like that, that if you have a hands on degree from one of the great schools, and I'll do a plug here of like the Flatiron School or the Lambda School, like those are really coveted boot camps. And if you get,
yeah,
if you do go to those schools, I think when it passes through our hiring managers' hands, or I guess if they, I guess that's if they have physical, but if they look at it, they're gonna be like, oh wow, I must take a look at this. So
definitely. Yeah, I think I was just reading an article recently about like these 15, companies that basically don't require a degree anymore. Everything from like Google to Ernst and Young, Costco, Whole Foods. A whole bunch of different places. Some of them are like big tech companies, and others are just like other big companies that are more than willing to give high-paying jobs to people that have the right skill set, regardless of whether they have a certain piece of paper saying they've done something for a certain period of time. But yeah, it's fascinating to me as to like what we now can do to get a degree. I think at this point we don't need to necessarily get a college degree, but I think it's important to still get those crucial skill sets that you need. But honestly, you can do a lot of these sorts of things just by going on YouTube and going to boot camps and sort of self teaching a lot of this sort of thing. I think it's much harder to teach yourself off of YouTube videos how to be a web developer, we'll say. But you definitely can through a very small amount of effort. Well, a small amount of time. I'll say a lot of effort, but a small amount of time. go through and learn the skill set you need to be competent in like sort of an entry level web developer position. So it's definitely possible. But yeah, what do you think? You have more to say on that, Brent?
Yeah, I think so. A couple things. You mentioned that bigger companies. So again, I forgot we did a horrible job of. We just assume you know who we are. So full time, I work at Google. So and you mentioned that we do hire people without tech degrees. I heard this stat. I don't know how accurate it is. It's hard to figure out. But the stat that I heard at Google was 5% of our workforce doesn't have a college degree, like a four-year college degree.
Yeah,
So that should be encouraging for people out there who maybe just went straight to a boot camp that that we do value people who do good work. And so however you present that good work, I think and I don't want to talk bad about colleges. I don't want to say like, oh, for your college degrees don't give you enough work. I think they're always constantly improving and making that better. It's just the stigma of, oh, you have to have tons of experience, and maybe colleges don't provide that. That's why they provided boot camps. But I think the idea is that you have to have some sort of experience, whether that's college degree, or if you didn't go to boot camp or you didn't do anything, that you have something to prove that you know what you're doing. So I would say you'd have to do a lot of personal projects if you literally have no degree that proves that you can handle the work if you get hired.
definitely. And if you're willing to do things like, describe the relevant skills that you do have, and you can like figure out what the jargon is to say on your resume and the right thing, that's half the battle. And then like you can build some kind of portfolio to show off to people. And if you're willing to do like internships and things like that, get real relevant experience and go through the pain of, maybe a lower salary for, a short period of time to kind of like learn from experts. It's a great way to just kind of like shoot yourself into a great career. I think it's just half about how you spend time acquiring the information you need.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to the question, can you get a job in tech without a college degree? Yes, you can. You just have to make sure that, you could back up, what you know. And I think also it's interesting we're talking about people who I guess who didn't go to college, but what happens if you change your major, for example? Like what happens if you have a degree in marketing, now you want to be a software engineer? Like it would just really you really need to, sure, you have a college degree, but maybe it's obviously not relevant. You just need to show off with personal projects uh, that you actually know how to do the actual coding. So however that is, and I think boot camps are good ways to give you the experience to do so. But if you don't do that, then you better have something of value that you could show off, and I think that makes the portfolio even more important.
Definitely. And depending on like what the job is, there's a lot of really interesting jobs out there in tech. So you might think, oh, there's no way that this college degree applies, but you'd be surprised. Like I have a friend that's a physical therapist, and he sort of transitioned to become a computer scientist, actually. And he's like, oh, well, this wasn't going to be relevant, but he interned at places that are specifically like healthcare related sort of fields, and he has that sort of expertise of like the human body and how it works and all that kind of stuff, and it gives him a leg up in the field. And he's sort of niched in one area, but it still kind of gives him that range to be able to do things all in computers but still use his degree. And it's the same thing like if you're in art or something like that, you can design websites or even things that really you wouldn't think would have any sort of direct comparison, like let's say music. There's a guy that works for Xbox. I forget his name, but he's sort of famous for like coming up with all of the sounds for Xbox, and sort of like he synthesizes and sort of records it. And he's like he works definitely in that sort of tech field for Xbox. So it kind of just depends on what you mean by a tech job, I think, and also how useful the degree is. There's a lot more transfer there than one might initially think.
Yep, that makes sense. So it can be done. Uh, cool. So,
So
oh, go
yeah,
ahead. Yeah,
go ahead.
you could set up. You could talk about the next topic we had.
Yeah, so basically, the next thing we were kind of discussing is basically how do we get leads for jobs when you don't necessarily have any, and this is actually a really common thing that we get asked a lot of the time. And there's a whole bunch of strategies that you can employ here, and there's sort of more common ones like reach out in your own network. You'd be amazed at how many people that know somebody that wants to have your skill set. So if you just reach one degree or two degrees out from your network, And things like LinkedIn are typically really good for sort of utilizing that. But honestly, just word of mouth is also a great thing too. Another strategy we really like to recommend is the idea of cold emails. So in the same way, like you go to a door and you'd knock door by door to, if you were a salesman trying to sell things, it's sort of this strategy of cold emailing companies and saying like, hey, here's my portfolio, here's everything I've done, I'd really like to work for you, here's why, and just sort of providing that sort of basis and that interest in that specific company, and it kind of gives a lot of openings that you wouldn't initially sort of suspect. And I guess I'd say one sort of final one that I can think of that's a really good one is the idea of internships. Internships are all over the place, and some of them might be unpaid, but the ability to do an internship oftentimes lead to a full-time job. My first full-time job was gotten by first being an intern at the company, and then I was offered to continue and get paid to do what I was doing for pennies at the time. And then so like that's a very common thing to kind of get yourself into. So if you're able to, or in a position where you don't necessarily have to do make a whole ton of money right away, or you can find some other way to sustain yourself, it's a great solution. Brent, do you have any ideas?
Yeah. So definitely agree with all your points. Like obviously referring from friends and anyone that you know that could help you get a job at the company they work at, or and hoping that they know.
Yeah,
That's definitely probably the most common one that people do. For me, I think a lot of times when you're looking for jobs, you're relying on maybe like LinkedIn or Indeed or something like that for the job to be listed. I think one way is kind of do some of the work on your own, like try to figure out the companies you want to work for, because sometimes you could go on the company website and see some jobs that are posted on there that haven't made it to LinkedIn or any of the popular job listing sites. I think
yeah,
that's one way to do it. Just like explore there, like go to the company's site itself, and then do it that way. And I think also another way is like if you really want to work at a specific company, then and they don't have any job postings or internship postings, feel free to email them. Obviously, you don't want to bug them, but I don't think it's so harmful to email them like, hey, this is so and so. This is my experience, and I'm interested in anything I could do for your company. And I think that just shows just shows a lot of good initiative there. I think like sometimes if you're really lucky, like yeah, we were thinking about this possible role, or maybe we're gonna have this role in like a couple months. We'll keep you in mind. I think that just shows that at least you have that connection, and you're not just another person applying through whatever the grapevine. I think that's just one way to kind of just get that initial contact with them, and I've seen that. I've definitely seen that work before. I kind of do that with if I try to find a company that I just want to like, oh, I think this company has a really good idea. Maybe I just want to maybe offer some like volunteer work to them. I think it's always just good to reach out to them directly and be like, hey, this is my experience, and let's see if there's something that makes sense for us to work together on. So,
yeah, and especially if it's like a startup, like no CEO is gonna see an email like that and be like, "What, you want to work for this company
yeah,
and you believe in it wholeheartedly? You terrible person!" Like it's definitely very flattering. So they will remember you for doing that.
yeah, makes sense. One thing we did want to share was a recent interview our CEO Amir did with the PolicyGenius CEO Jennifer Fitzgerald. They talk about what PolicyGenius does and what they've been focusing on, along with how their interview process works. So check it out.
Okay, we are live. You are being officially recorded, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Jennifer Fitzgerald, again, to kick off, thank you very much for your willingness to do this interview. Our goal is that, we'll go through all 10 minutes, or we'll go through all 10 questions of this that were presented to you earlier. And you are the CEO and founder of a company called PolicyGenius. You are based in New York. You've raised over $50 million in funding, and you've hired hundreds of employees. So for the purposes of the blog, I was hoping to ask you those 10 questions that were all related to interviewing and hiring. Is that okay?
That sounds good.
Awesome. So to kick off, can you tell me a little bit about what PolicyGenius does?
Sure. PolicyGenius is a digital managed marketplace for insurance. So you can think about us as the place you'll go if you need life insurance, home insurance, renter's insurance, and you want to shop the market, compare rates, compare policies, and then eventually buy a policy. You come to us.
Very cool. And how large is your team currently? I know you've hired hundreds of employees, but what are like the specific numerics behind that?
Sure. So we are right now at about 250 employees.
Wow.
And growing very quickly. So that's probably double what we were even just like at the beginning of the year.
That's pretty amazing and pretty intense for your recruiting team and also for you, I'm sure.
That it is.
Well, congratulations on the success. So I know you'd mentioned growing now. Are you expecting to grow much more over the next 12 to 18 months?
Yep, we are. So we are continuing to invest in growth in all of our business lines, which is going to require more talented people to come join us. So I would expect, maybe another doubling of headcount in the next 12 to 18 months.
Wow, congratulations. That is quite the endeavor, and it's not something that comes easily. So you've obviously been winning the right way. So with all this growth, I mean, going from whatever small number you started out, whether it was just yourself to now 250, and then from 250 to possibly 500 employees over the next 18 months. Can you tell me a little bit about the interview process that you've implemented? I know each department probably has a differing one, but the overarching interviewing process that's helped you get to be this big and successful?
Sure. So the interview process generally follows a very similar structure across roles. We tailor it depending on the level of the role and the team that the person is interviewing for, but we want it to be very structured. So we kick off with an interview plan before we open interviewing for any role, where we get the whole interview team together to align on this is the profile that we're hiring for. This is the schedule of people who are going to talk to them. This is the type of interview each person who's involved is going to do, so we can get reads across the different things that we're testing for, whether it be like communication and collaboration skills or like specific technical competencies. It's a very structured interview process. We train everybody at the company who participates in interviewing. Again, it's the most important thing that we can do as a company, which is interviewing and screening and hiring the best talent. So everybody's trained, everybody goes through interview training and onboarding before they get to participate. And even then, we will typically have interviewers shadow more experienced interviews until they're able to do it on their own. So overall, that's the high level structure. And again, there's going to be different flavors depending on how level it is. So like an associate level role versus like a director or VP role is going to look different. The interviews by team, so a marketing interview is going to look different than like a software engineering interview, but the principles are by and large the same, right? We're testing for values alignment, we're testing for technical competency, we're testing for the ability to be collaborative, and just, a good person to work with, and one who can like add to how we are operating as a company. Very
cool. And it sounds as if you have a tight ship there, and processes key to how you've been successful thus far. And I agree, process ultimately makes the difference to the candidate as well. When they're seeing a really fluid candidate experience, it communicates to them your excellence. And on top of that, gets them to the pipeline and gives them a better understanding of the types of things that you're looking to achieve. So love that. Outside of your interviewing process, that's obviously very collaborative and very much engaging with the rest of your employees within the org who all partake, it sounds as if, within the interviewing process after some training. What is the core philosophy that you embed on your team when it comes to hiring and interviewing? Are there a set of 3 principles or just one principle that kind of dictates the recruiting machine or the hiring and interviewing machine at PolicyGenius?
Sure. I think, the overall principle is we want to hire the best possible talent for the role. We believe in earning talent and not necessarily just throwing money to buy talent, right? Compensation is important, but at the end of the day, we want somebody coming to PolicyGenius because they're sold on the overall value proposition of us as an employer versus like, oh, they paid me the most, so I'm going to go work there, right? So it's an important distinction that we talk about. And then the supporting principles are, somebody needs to be able to do the role and have the technical competency for the role. They also need to be aligned in terms of values and be somebody that is not going to be disruptive, is not a chucklehead, isn't going to present like a big disruption to our values and how we work as a company, that's just as important. So I know increasingly the no jerks or no assholes rule has catching on in companies. Like we call it the no chuckleheads rule, but we live by it. And we've turned down candidates who otherwise on paper and in the interview process were, very technically competent, but we were able to get a sense that they would not be collaborative, or they might bring a lot of arrogance to the team. And anybody who's worked on a team knows that it only takes one bad apple to ruin an otherwise good dynamic.
Absolutely. I can definitely relate to the no jerks, no chuckleheads, no assholes rule. It's one that we embody here at Skilled as well. And it's absolutely important because one bad experience, one bad apple, like you mentioned, can ruin the entirety of what you've built, both from a recruiting perspective and also from an interviewing perspective. How long, so obviously 250 employees now, but you didn't start there. So how long did it take you to go from yourself and maybe your co-founders to 10 employees? Was it a long process to get to those first 10, or was it relatively quick?
It was a long time. So we went from 2 to 5 within a few months. So we had raised some seed funding that allowed us to hire our first few employees, so our head of engineering, our head of product design, and then we hired a head of content. And it was me and my co-founder. And we were 5 people for a long time until we actually raised, till we built a product, launched it in market, got traction, and then we're able to raise a bigger institutional round of funding, which is our Series A. So it took us 2 years probably to get from 2 to 10.
Very cool. And then now everything's flying like a rocket ship. So
it's crazy. It's crazy to think about how long we were, a very small team that could fit around one small table.
And now you would need several hundreds of those tables possibly.
We do.
So when you went from maybe even 2 to 5 to 10 to now 250 and then 250 to maybe up to 500 employees, I'm sure I'm sure the characteristics of what you were looking for in candidates changed, or maybe they even kind of altered. So my first question would be, what were the 3 main characteristics you looked for in those first 10 hires? And then how did they change, or how did those characteristics change as you continued to grow?
Sure. I think early on, for initial hires and employees, you're looking for people who are all around generalist athletes, right? Because everybody basically is wearing 27 different hats. You have less control over what the next day and the next day and the next day is going to look like, because you're trying to find product market fit. You have no idea what's going to work in terms of the product, in terms of like the channels that you're acquiring customers. So you need all around athletes who are comfortable with that ambiguity, comfortable like context switching, comfortable wearing 27 different hats, and have a lot of grit and can run fast, right? Because you are basically in a race against the clock in those early days. As you get bigger, and figure out, hey, this is our product, this is the market we're going after, this is where we have a right to win, then you shift. I mean, you still need those good generalist all-around athletes, but then you also start to need like specialist roles, right? If you figure out that social media is something that's going to be important to you, then you probably want to hire a social media specialist, right? You start to specialize in your software engineering team because you're going to need different technical competencies there. So the bigger that you get, the more specialized your hiring is, because 1, you have a sense of what you want and need, and then 2, your business is just going to be more complicated at the end of the day.
Very interesting. Do you suspect now, with the growth that you're projecting, that you will again kind of reevaluate how you hire and how you evaluate candidates, or do you suspect that you're going to maintain what got you to this point, and obviously very successfully?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we probably still have a lot of runway with our current interview process and how we think about it. You can always get better, which is what I work on a lot with our people team, is like, how do we continue to get better and more efficient in terms of recruiting and hiring? But the overall structure that we've created and the rigor that we bring to the interview process, I think is something that we can continue to scale with.
Very cool. A couple of more questions for you, and then I'll let you go on with your busy day, because I know how busy you are. Is there a hire that you made that fundamentally changed your business? And this could be either for better or for worse. And if so, what lesson did you learn from that hire?
Sure. I think if I go back to the early days, it wasn't necessarily just one hire, but our first few hires that stayed with us for several years, and some of whom are still with us. The thing that really changed, one, they believed in us, right? And we wouldn't have been able to do anything without them, which, they took a leap of faith on two first-time founders, a company that didn't have a ton of money, didn't have any brand heft in the market. So they took a risk, and we wouldn't be here today without them. And two, what those early successful hires taught us is how important it is to have people who are bought into the mission, have a ton of grit, and are really effective problem solvers, which coincidentally became three of our core company values as we got bigger. So I think we learned a lot about what makes for a successful startup employees based on, those first few critical hires that we made as a company.
That's awesome. And I think that really highlights what made you successful ultimately was being able to identify those principles earlier on in those hires and making the appropriate hires to identify such strong principles. So I'm sure you're not involved in every single interview, considering how much you've grown and how much you plan to grow. But the interviews that you are involved in the terms of directly interviewing the candidate, what is your favorite interview question?
My favorite interview question that I ask basically everybody is, if I were to talk to your boss, what would he or she say is the most challenging thing about working with you?
That's a great question.
That always causes people to be like, oh. And the reason why I like it is it's a different spin.
That was a great interview, and we hope to bring you more interviews like that in the future.
Fantastic.
Cool. So, so one thing I did want to talk about was there was some news about the creator of Python retiring, and I'm not going to, Mike, you could take a stab at his name.
Yeah, it's Guido Rossum, I think. I don't know if it's Guido Van
Guido
Rossum, I think.
Van Rossum. Yeah, I think you said it right. So it's I don't want to say it's a little confusing, but so he was the inventor of the Python programming language, and so I guess he initially wanted to retire back in 2011, but he ended up working for Dropbox for a couple of years, and so his official retirement is he's stopping work at Dropbox, and I think they were just utilizing him as I think their company just uses a lot, millions and millions of Python code. And so obviously he was the guy there that helped make sure that they're doing everything right. So his
Right.
retirement is him leaving the company, and then he's probably gonna, just stop working on it. That doesn't mean that Python is going away, by no means. It just means that he's no longer going to be the guy thinking of new things, I guess. I don't know, Mike. You probably have better
My
take on
understanding
it.
is he's still going to be. Yeah. I think my understanding is that he's still going to be working on Python, and when he says retired, he just means from the official business life, not that he's
Got
not
it.
going to still have his hobbies. And Python started as sort of a hobby programming project that he was doing, so I'm sure he still kind of probably thinks of it like it as that. So I imagine we'll still see contributions from him.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It was interesting. He didn't.
fantastic.
I thought the person who made Python would be his last name would be Python, but I guess not. I guess he isn't.
No, it's a reference actually to Monty Python. So there's actually a whole bunch of things in the code base. So if any of our listeners get a chance to peruse the Python code base by any chance, you'll see a whole bunch of references to Python and some funny jokes in the comments of it. There's a really funny one about importing anti-gravity and stuff in there. And there's a whole bunch of cool Easter eggs in there for those that want to dive in. But yeah. Very interesting, and that was just one of things. There's a whole bunch of interesting things that sort of happened in tech this past sort of week or two. This one that I saw that I really liked was a guy dressed up. So it's what, the 3rd now, November 3rd. So Halloween just happened, and this guy just dressed up as the CTCI book. So Cracking the Coding Interview is a very popular book that was written by Gail McDowell. and basically it's like 190 or 189 different programming questions and solutions to them. And the guy, his name is Rohit, I believe. And he basically is like, I was told to dress up as something scary, so I dressed up as the scariest thing I could think of, and he's dressed up as this cracking the coding interview book. It got a lot of attention on LinkedIn. It was definitely just something kind of funny to to look at. But yeah, I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, no, I'm looking
But
at it
yeah,
right now. I didn't know you did. I didn't see it until you mentioned it. It's crazy. I mean, yeah, his costume is really funny, and the post is really dang. It got
yeah,
over like 5,000 likes. It's crazy how you could post
yeah.
something on LinkedIn and it becomes viral, like viral on LinkedIn. I think that's really cool. But
Yeah. Well, my favorite thing is so Gail McDowell was the person that, like I said, wrote the book, and she's like the first person I think that responded to this, or she was one of the
yeah.
responses in it, and she says like, "This is the best thing I've seen in my entire life." So she loved it, so that's pretty awesome that she
Yeah,
responded.
that's cool. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, that's cool. It's a good way. I think that's just like a good way to, get out there and like post and stuff. And I think it's just showing your creativity and things like that. And people are gonna remember him as the guy that did that. It's just definitely something.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna help him get jobs in the future, but it definitely makes him memorable and stands out. So I think it's definitely cool to see. And yeah. I'm sure it'll get him at least
definitely.
a phone call or a chat with Gail, which is cool enough in itself.
For sure. And I mean, when you think about it, like half the point is just trying to get noticed and get a job. And that's actually a great segue into
Yeah.
this interesting next thing. You wanna kind of intro it? Like, this is fantastic.
Yeah. So this one is so a student lands a job with a Fortune 500 company using Post-it notes.
Yeah.
So I guess
Yeah.
so I guess and again, this falls into like just trying to, land an interview. Like, how do I get noticed? Especially hiring people are just always constantly seeing, the same resumes, people coming from the same jobs, things like that. But he actually put on, what is it like? It's like a window or something like that. He said, um, he
Yep.
like
On
spelled
this
out
window
"hire me," I guess facing the company that he wanted
in
to
Post-it
potentially work
notes.
for, and they made Post-it notes back, and they said email question mark. So it definitely started the conversation there.
Yeah. Oh, and it's funny because it's like you can imagine these like giant like Post-it note block letters just on this big glass building. And then like this other person on this other side of the street is responding to
Yeah.
you in Post-it notes. Like that's just that's so cool. I love that. Like people are
Yeah, I
great. I
wonder.
love
So
people.
then the next question is, and I I didn't know if I saw it in the article. So it started with hire me and Post-it notes from him. The company said email question mark, and what did he do? Did he write his email in Post-it notes, or did he walk over there or something like that? It's you don't want to end up. I guess that's how people end up with spam, right?
Right,
Just
right.
like,
If you
yeah.
just put your email on the side of a building and Post-it notes, yeah, you're kind of asking for spam, I think, at that point. But hey, if it gets him a
I
job,
assume
probably
let's
worth
just
it.
assume that he walked over there and introduced himself. But again, it goes back to like how do you stand out? How do you be memorable? Whether you wear
Yeah,
a book on Halloween or make post-it notes, people are gonna remember you, and you're being creative, and showing initiative and showing that you're trying to do more than just the fill out a resume and then send it to an email, right? Like I think that's a lot of reasons why people ask for cover letters. It's kind of like a blank canvas for, hey, write me something that catches my attention, and it works, right?
right.
So
And it's good on the company too. Like it says, like a Fortune 500 company responded, so I'm not actually sure what the company is, but like good on the company for like taking notice and like taking it seriously. Like companies sort of reaching out and helping people. I think that's kind of awesome as well, which is interesting enough because the last article we kind of were talking about was the idea of Lyft, specifically sort of like helping people get jobs by offering to give rides for free to job interviews. So if you can like prove that you have a job interview from someplace, like they'll pick you up and take you there. From my understanding, totally free. Like, what do you think about this,
yeah,
man? I
so
love
yeah,
this.
if you could prove that you're going to a job, and it makes sense. Like if there's people who you've been out of a job for so long, and let's say for example, like that person could potentially be going to 10, 20 interviews, that adds up, right? And where are they going to get that
Yeah,
money?
yeah,
from, and it just adds added stress. So if Lyft can provide something to them that makes it so that it's, less stressful, so they don't have to worry about that, like how do they get to the interview on time and things like that. I think that just helps out. And I think they even said that if you do get the job, they give you free rides to that job for the first 3 weeks of employment. So it's kind of like, it makes sense. Like, you're not going to get your
That's awesome.
paycheck until 2 or 3 weeks, and it's just trying to help you out. And it's kind of like those, what is that subreddit? It's like humans being bros. It's just, Lyft is being a bro by just helping you out.
Yeah. Well, that's I don't know who initiated that idea, but I love that, and especially the whole like 3 weeks afterwards. That's sort of a subtle thing I think a lot of people don't realize, especially like coming out of college. They're like, "Oh, my start date is January 1st. Okay, I'm gonna go on vacation and move to this new place, and then I'll come back, 5 days before my start date, and then get ready." And they'll like, I think I've seen a lot of people overlook the fact that they're not going to be paid for like almost a month into the job, so they need to make sure they're saving like that extra bit to kind of cover that. So I think it's great that Lyft is sort of offering to help that
Yep.
out.
So
So
that's
that's
the feel
fantastic.
good company of the week, Lyft. So good to hear those. Good to hear those stories, and I'm
Yeah,
sure Lyft. Yeah, warm fuzzies. Especially
the warm
all the news
fuzzies.
that's happening with Uber. I think it makes sense for Lyft to do everything possible to, be on the good side of people. So I think the good marketing move, definitely. So
For sure.
um, cool. So those were the topics that we wanted to talk about today. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed our first episode. Definitely let us know if there's specific articles that we missed this week, or if there's any topics that you would like us to discuss in upcoming episodes. But hopefully, we'll be able to keep doing this, and you will give us your feedback on how on how this episode went. So I don't know if you want to say any last things, Mike.
No, I think this was fun, and let us know if you prefer this over like the YouTube videos itself, because yeah, we're kind of experimenting with like what's the best way to reach people. So do you
Yep.
like the
And
podcast?
so
Let us know.
we don't want to act like too much podcast news, but I assume you'll be able to find this podcast wherever you find your other podcasts. So you'll definitely find it. We'll definitely try to link it through all our social media and things like that. So you'll definitely find us. And we're naming this Skilled Cast.
SkilledCast, I love it. It's like skilled the
Yep.
company, and then also like
I,
podcast
I
over
thought of that
squishing
one
them
just right
together.
off the top of my